Hi y'all, and happy Friday. Hopefully this is the last day that I will be out. I have a doctor's appointment on Friday, and hopefully the doctor releases me to go back out in public again, and hopefully I'll be back on Monday. So today we're going to go over these notes. They're going to be pretty quick. So once you're finished with this video, you can finish, excuse me, whatever else you need to. So anything else that the subs have given you over the course of the week, you can go ahead and finish that and make sure it gets turned into the tray before Friday. Okay. So these notes are going to be focusing on intervals of increasing and decreasing, looking at the graph of a polynomial. So there's a couple vocab blanks up here. A blank is a point that is higher than all the other points within a small local interval. So the key word there is small local interval and also higher. Whoops, meant for that to be highlighted. Okay, so it's higher than all the other points on a small local interval. So that is what is called a local max. So it doesn't mean that it's the absolute highest point on the entire graph. It's just that if I were to be looking at a little segment of the graph, it would be the highest point in that area. Okay, the next one, this one is the overall highest point on the graph. So that is our absolute max. The next one, a blank is a point that is lower than all other points within a small local interval. So it's the lowest point within a certain region. So that is going to be a local min. The next one is the overall lowest point on the graph. So that is an absolute min. A function is blank if it has a positive slope. So positive slope means that it rises as it goes from the left to the right. So if it goes up as you're reading it from left to right, that means that it's increasing. And then a function is blank if it has a negative slope. So if it goes downward reading from left to right, then it's decreasing. And there's this handy picture down here that includes all of that information just so you can have a visual there. So notice the, where are we? The local points. So these local minimums here and a local maximum here, they're not the absolute lowest or the absolute highest point on the graph. They're just dips that you see in the graph. And if it's a dip and it's at the bottom, it's a minimum. And if it's like a hill that's on the top, then it's a maximum. These guys are local and they're absolute. They're local because you're still looking at it, but it's also absolute because it's the highest or the lowest point that you see in the picture of the graph that you're looking at. And then if you have an open circle like here, the function doesn't actually touch that point, so it's not a maximum and it's not a minimum. The function just doesn't exist at that point. The areas where you see the graph going down, so right here, that's where it's decreasing. You see your graph going back up, it's increasing. It's going to go down again, that's decreasing. And then climb up one more time, and that's increasing. Okay, so it's just a breakdown of what the vocab words are. Okay, next page. So first thing that you're going to do, I know this is a really ugly equation, but it's made that way so we can see certain things happen. So what I'm highlighting right now, on your calculator, go to the graph page and type that in. You do not need, well, as of when you're graphing, you do not need to type this portion into the calculator. Just type in the portion that I highlighted. So pause the video and do that. Now, the picture that I have over here, I graphed mine on Desmos. Well, let me go here. This is a picture of the graph with that restriction of the -7 and the 6 applied to it. Your graph will not have that restriction. So if you want to, you can sketch this picture on your notes. And I've stopped my graph at the X values of -7 and +6. So maybe take a moment, sketch this graph in your notes. You can use the one on your calculator as well. I just don't have the graphing calculator on my iPad to show you step by step. So if you want this exact picture, you can go to Desmos and graph it that way as well. That's how I got it. And then I just clicked on all the points to show you like every single thing that's there, just so you can get a really clear picture of what's happening. So your y-intercept for part A, that is where your graph is going to cross the y-axis. So looking here, that happens at this point of 0,0.7. So that right there is my y-intercept. There are no other places on the graph where I cross the y-intercept. So that is my answer for the first part, and I'm going to list it as a point. So I'm going to put 0.7. Okay, the next part is asking about x-intercepts. Whoa. X-intercepts are where the graph crosses the x-axis. That happens 3 different times. So it happens here at -5, 0, -1, 0, and 2, 0. Those blue lines that are there, I tried to draw those to like connect it to the points that were being represented. So I know it's confusing because there's a lot of lines, but just follow the blue arrow. So we have -5, -1, and 2. Let's write that. Okay, so here's my intercepts. Now, domain and range. Remember that your domain looks from left to right, and your range goes from the bottom to the top. So as I'm reading this graph left to right, I'm looking for the leftmost point for domain and the rightmost point for domain. So if I'm looking here, that is my leftmost point, and then here, this is my rightmost point. And if you look at the expression that's up here, it's kind of already given you the answer. That's your domain. It goes from -7 to +6, but since there's an open circle there at -7, I'm not going to use the line underneath of my inequality symbol because I don't actually touch that point. So your domain goes from -7 to +6. And the reason I'm using an X is because X values are my domain. When I write the range in inequality notation, I'm going to have the letter Y there. Okay, so the range goes from the bottom of your graph. Hold on. Zoom in. Hello. Okay. Goes from the bottom of the graph to the top of the graph. So the bottommost point is down here, and my topmost point is up here. Okay, and I'm only going to be paying attention to the Y values of those points. So that number there and that number there are all I care about for the range. and I'm going to go from the smallest number to the biggest number. So, can I move this? Yes. No, kind of. Okay. The smallest number in my range is the negative 7.534. And I do actually touch that point. So I'm going to put that symbol, my Y. And then the next point, I touch that as well. And that is 0.905. So that is my domain and range in inequality notation. I don't know why that's attached to the picture now, but whatever, that's your range. You can pause the video and copy it down if you need to. Okay, your local maxima, those are the highest numbers that you see in an interval. So you're not necessarily looking at the absolute highest and lowest points. You're just looking for the dips, how do I say, like kind of like you're looking for the turning points. You're just looking for those points. So let's kind of label those. I guess blue maybe. Okay. So I see down here, this has an open circle. So it is not allowed to be a maximum or a minimum. So we're just going to throw that point out. Now let's investigate the points that we did not label as an x-intercept or a y-intercept. So I'm looking at this point here. This point is a is a dip in the graph. So this, and it's towards the bottom. So this is a local min. Then I'm going to look for the next point that is not an x-intercept or a y-intercept that's the highest point. So up here, this point is a local max. It is also the highest point that I see in that interval. So we can also call this an absolute max. So it's local because it's in the picture, and it's absolute because it's the highest overall point in that picture. Where else? And then at the very bottom, this point down here, this is going to be a local and an absolute min. Okay. So I'm going to list those as points. So where it says local maxima, I have, what point is that? 0.711905. Do we have any more maxes? No, we had 2 more mins though. Okay. So your other minima were at negative 2.744821, and then 5.434, negative 7.534. Okay, the intervals of increasing and decreasing are like the hardest parts to list out. We're going to list them in interval notation because they are intervals. So increasing, I'm looking for places where if I read the graph from left to right, it's going up. So I'm going to go from point to point, okay? So I'm going to start at that open circle at the bottom, the negative 7 undefined. From that point up until I hit the negative 50, I'm increasing. So increasing and decreasing intervals never get brackets. They always get parentheses. And you're only going to list the x values of the point. You don't have to list the whole point, just list the x value of that point. So maybe make a little note always X values and parentheses, just as a reminder, okay? So increasing, the first number that I started at was -7, comma, the next number that I landed on was -5. Then I'm going to jump from increasing to decreasing. So as I'm decreasing, I'm going from -5 to -2.744. Okay, then I'm going to go and increase again. So looking back at your increasing interval, remember when there's a jump in your graph, you have to put a U. So I'm going to put that U for union, and I'm going to go from my previous X value, which was the -2.744. And if you notice, I don't stop increasing again. So I'm going to increase all the way until I hit that absolute maximum. And that X value is at 0.711. So I increase all the way from that local min of -2.744 up until that absolute max of 0.711. Then my graph decreases again for quite some time. So it goes all the way to the next point of 2, and then it continues decreasing all the way down until you hit that absolute minimum. So for your decreasing, you're going to put a U for union, and we're going to go from our absolute max point. The X value of that was at 0.711, and then I decrease all the way from that point until I get to my absolute min, and the X value of that was 5.434. Then I have one more little switch from decreasing to increasing, and that little area just highlighted green. So I'm going to go back to my increasing list and put a U, and that happens from 5.434 until I get to the X value of 6. So I have a lot of different U's because it switches from increasing to decreasing multiple times throughout the graph. Okay, so that is it. Whatever you need to finish, go ahead and finish. Hopefully I will be back on Monday, and I can't wait to see y'all. Have a great weekend.